They never truly respected your kindness. Let's just be honest about that. They may have smiled, they may have thanked you, they may have nodded and said all the right things, but deep down in the undercurrent of their behavior, they didn't respect your warmth. They respected your silence, your unpredictability, your restraint, the possibility that behind your calm smile there was a storm you could unleash, but chose not to. That's what holds weight in this world, not your desire to be liked, but your potential to be feared. Machiavelli didn't create this truth. He just had the courage to say it out loud. Most people still don't. From a young age, we're trained to be pleasant, polite, agreeable. But we're not trained to understand what actually moves the world, what actually makes people back down, what actually protects you from betrayal. The reality is power respects power. Not virtue, not innocence, not politeness, and certainly not your eagerness to please. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. It's what happens when you wipe the fog off the mirror and see people for who they are, driven by fear, advantage, and survival, not sentiment. That's the lens Machiavelli offered. And once you see through it, you never see the world the same way again. Why does the world remember the names of conquerors, not saints? Why do the powerful dominate while the kind are forgotten? Because history isn't written in feelings, it's written in force. Power isn't something passed gently from one hand to another. It's taken. It's guarded. It's preserved by people willing to go further, move faster, and act when others are frozen by doubt. The world doesn't run on fairy tales. It runs on leverage. Now, that doesn't mean you need to become a tyrant. But it does mean you need to stop thinking that being good is enough. Because it's not. And if you keep waiting for your decency to be rewarded, you'll end up bitter, ignored, and used. That's the danger of naivety. It turns you into a stepping stone. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince as a manual for monsters. He wrote it as a mirror, a reflection of how the world actually works. And when you look into that mirror, you see something uncomfortable. People follow strength. People fear clarity. People obey what they can't predict. On paper, society pretends to care about fairness and equality. But in reality, the powerful bend the rules. The weak follow them. Ruthlessness, then, isn't cruelty for its own sake. It's the ability to act decisively when the moment demands it. It's choosing outcome over optics, results over reputation. And yes, that makes people uncomfortable, especially those who have no power of their own. But look around. Do the people you admire get paralyzed by self-doubt? Do they crumble when faced with unpopular decisions, or do they move forward with precision even when others resist? The truth is, we admire strength even when we pretend not to. Why? Because strength gives us certainty. We live in a world teetering on chaos, and the only thing that stabilizes it is leadership backed by decisiveness. Not softness, not sympathy, but the ability to do what others can't stomach. Take a surgeon, for example. Would you want one who can't make a cut because they're afraid to cause pain? Of course not. That refusal to act would cause more suffering in the long run. And the same applies to leadership, whether it's in politics, business, family, or your own life. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is make the hard choice now to avoid disaster later. Machiavelli understood that. He understood that avoiding ruthlessness in the name of kindness often leads to deeper destruction. So no, this isn't about being cold. This is about being courageous. It's about having the guts to cut the infection out of the system before it spreads. That's what earns respect. Not niceness, not compromise, but clarity of purpose and the willingness to protect it even if people don't like you for it. You don't get remembered for how many people liked you. You get remembered for how many people couldn't ignore you. Ruthlessness, then, is not about cruelty. It's about discipline. It's about understanding the rules of the game and playing it better than anyone else. It's the difference between acting with foresight and reacting out of fear, between creating momentum and waiting for permission. And most people, they wait. They hesitate, they explain, they hope for approval. The ruthless don't. The ruthless move with or without applause. And when they do, the world adjusts. Because fear creates boundaries, and boundaries create control. And in a chaotic world, control is what people respect most. Machiavelli said it simply, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." That line isn't a celebration of cruelty. It's a diagnosis of reality. Love is conditional. It fades, it fluctuates. But fear lasts. Fear makes people think twice. Fear makes people show up on time. Fear makes betrayal expensive. Because people don't betray what they're afraid to lose. And that's the point. You don't need to hurt anyone. You just need them to believe that crossing you has a cost. That's what power really is: potential. The most powerful people in any room rarely speak the most. But when they do, people listen. Why? Because their words carry weight. Because their silence carried more. Ruthlessness is not about hurting people. It's about positioning. It's about stepping outside the illusion that kindness alone will carry you and stepping into the kind of strength that makes people think twice before testing you. Because the world doesn't pity the weak, it forgets them. So don't confuse being nice with being effective. And don't confuse being feared with being evil. If you've ever been walked over, if you've ever been overlooked while someone louder, sharper, bolder got the reward, then you already know. You've just been waiting for someone to say it. So here it is. The world doesn't respect your goodness. It respects your power. Start building it. Let's get one thing straight. Fear is not cruelty. Fear is control. It's the invisible border that makes people hesitate before they cross you. It's the boundary that says I could, but I choose not to. For now. And that possibility, that reserved firepower, is what commands respect in a way kindness never could. Think about it. People don't test the limits of those who show teeth. They test the ones who show only smiles. That's why the man who appears dangerous, even if he never lifts a finger, is often the most respected. It's not what you do. It's what they think you could do. That's where Machiavelli's brilliance lies. He understood that the perception of strength is as powerful as strength itself. You don't have to rule with violence, but you do need to signal that if lines are crossed, consequences will follow. That signal, silent, unshakable, makes the world think twice. And here's the irony: people are more loyal to those they fear than to those they love. Love asks for something. Fear demands it. Love is a choice. Fear is instinct. Fear stabilizes behavior when circumstances get unstable. In a storm, people don't look to the sweetest voice in the room. They look to the one who stands firm, unshaken, decisive. That's the person who leads. That's the person who gets followed even if everyone secretly resents them. Machiavelli's point wasn't that you should crave being feared. His point was that fear is more durable than affection, especially in crisis. Loyalty born of fear is not fragile. It's not blown away by rumors or inconvenience. It doesn't need constant reassurance. It doesn't depend on good moods or fair weather. It comes from one thing: respect for your potential. That's the art of psychological presence. You become the variable they don't want to mess with. You become the unknown in their equation, the one thing they can't predict, can't dismiss, can't play games with. And when you reach that level of strategic ambiguity, you rarely have to raise your voice. You rarely have to enforce. People adjust on their own because they've seen what happens when others didn't. Let's be clear, this is not about bullying. This is not about being feared because you're cruel. It's about being respected because you're controlled. That control is what keeps your frame unshakable when everyone else is collapsing. It's what lets you operate in silence while others shout to prove themselves. It's what lets you choose mercy when you don't have to, and that's when mercy means something. Anyone can be soft when they're powerless. But when you're in command and you choose restraint, that contrast is what elevates you from ordinary to unforgettable. It's the difference between a harmless man and a dangerous man who chooses not to harm. The first is ignored, the second is respected, because the second has options. And that's what leadership is: the power to choose outcomes. Machiavelli never said morals were useless. He said morals without power are meaningless. You can be kind, but if your kindness can't protect you, it's not a virtue. It's a liability. You can be merciful, but if your mercy stems from fear of conflict, it's not noble. It's just weakness dressed as virtue. Real power is when your mercy is optional, when your decisions come from clarity, not compliance. And the moment you begin making decisions based on whether others will approve is the moment you surrender power to them. That's the trap: trying to be liked. Leaders who chase popularity end up resented. Why? Because the minute they make one hard call, all the goodwill they've built evaporates. People turn. The crowd that once cheered suddenly boo. And the leader, addicted to their approval, starts making compromises. And one by one, they lose control. But the leader who is feared, he doesn't need to be liked. He acts clearly, consistently, and because people expect him to be firm, he never has to apologize for it. His power is clean. His lines are drawn, and when he chooses to show kindness, it actually lands. Because it's rare. It's earned. You want your actions to carry weight, then stop trying to be agreeable all the time. Because the more you explain, the more you lose posture. The more you beg to be understood, the more you become dependent on others' approval. And power doesn't beg. It doesn't justify itself. It just is. The most respected people in any room aren't the loudest. They're the ones everyone watches. The ones who can end a conversation with a look. The ones whose silence makes people question themselves. You know someone like that. Someone who doesn't need to raise their voice because their presence speaks louder than words. That's not arrogance. That's command. That's the result of ruthless discipline, the ability to detach emotion from strategy. To lead even when it means being misunderstood. To act without waiting for applause. And that detachment, that's not emptiness. That's emotional clarity. You can't lead effectively if you're tangled up in guilt and people-pleasing. You can't rise if every decision requires a committee of approval. You can't protect your vision if you're constantly adjusting it for comfort. Machiavelli's point was simple: a leader must learn how not to be good. Not because goodness is bad, but because the world punishes fragility disguised as goodness. Because sometimes goodness is the infection. Sometimes you have to cut. Sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes you have to disappoint, distance, and divide. And the ruthless don't hesitate. They don't wait for everyone to agree. They move. They lead. And yes, people will judge them. People will call them cold, distant, arrogant. Let them. Because while they talk, you'll still be moving forward. And when things fall apart, they'll come to you. Because they'll remember who made the hard decisions. And they'll remember who couldn't. That's the paradox of ruthlessness. Those who resent your strength still rely on it. You ever notice how the people labeled ruthless are often the ones holding everything together? It's not a coincidence. Because when the world starts falling apart, when emotions run high and nobody wants to make the call, it's the ruthless who step forward. They're not driven by ego. They're not trying to impress anyone. They move with purpose, not panic. While others spiral, they solidify. And it's that solidity, that unshakable center that people end up trusting, not because they love it, but because they need it. In a world addicted to approval, the ruthless are rare. They're not trying to be popular. They're trying to be effective. They don't post every thought, don't chase applause, don't water down their decisions for likes. They don't fear being misunderstood, they expect it. And in doing so, they become powerful, because they refuse to let emotion run the show. While others are stuck in guilt or doubt or indecision, the ruthless operate like surgeons. They assess, they cut, they move on. Not because they're heartless, but because they understand that clarity is kindness. And indecision, that's cruelty. Because while you hesitate, others suffer. While you try to keep everyone happy, the rot spreads. And when it all falls apart, you realize too late that what felt like compassion was actually avoidance. The ruthless don't avoid. They confront. They provoke when needed. They draw lines when necessary. They choose who stays, and they're not afraid to remove what weakens the structure. That's not evil. That's leadership. Every empire, every business, every legacy that survived the storm was built on the same foundation: discipline. The ability to say no, the willingness to make cuts, the strength to hold a line when others beg you to compromise. Because here's the truth most won't say out loud. Most people aren't ready to lead. Not because they lack talent or vision, but because they lack stomach. They want the title, not the responsibility. They want the spotlight, not the shadow work. They want influence, but they're afraid to offend. They want to be followed, but they still want to be liked by everyone. And those two things, mutually exclusive. You cannot lead and be universally loved. The moment you take a stand, a real one, someone's going to hate you for it. And the minute that fear of hate creeps into your decision-making, you're no longer leading. You're reacting. You're protecting your image, not your mission. The ruthless don't do that. They accept that opposition is part of the path. They understand that enemies aren't a sign of failure, they're proof you're doing something real. Because nothing of value moves through the world without resistance. You ever watch someone walk into a room and the energy shifts? No shouting, no theatrics, just presence. People lower their voices. They sit up straighter. They watch what they say. That's power. And it's not about being intimidating for the sake of it. It's about having a frame so grounded that others instinctively respect it. It's about being able to say no without explanation. to walk away without drama, to take action without announcing it. And people feel that, even if they never say it out loud. They feel it when they're in your space. They feel it when they hesitate before testing you. They feel it when they adjust their behavior, not because you asked, but because they know. That's what the ruthless master presents. They know that influence doesn't come from noise. It comes from consistency, from doing exactly what you say you'll do, from having a reputation that moves ahead of you and speaks louder than anything you could say yourself. You want to be untouchable? Start being consistent. Start being the person who doesn't waver when the pressure rises, the one who doesn't apologize for setting boundaries, the one who doesn't dilute their vision just because someone got uncomfortable, because people will try to test you. That's inevitable. But here's the trick: when your reputation makes even the idea of testing you feel dangerous, you won't need to fight often. Your name does the work. Your posture enforces the standard. That's the power of strategic ruthlessness. It's not recklessness. It's restraint. It's doing what needs to be done, and only what needs to be done with clarity and calm. No extra words, no performative emotion, just clean, calculated moves that say, I don't play by your expectations, I set the terms. And when you do that consistently, you shift from reacting to dictating. You stop chasing outcomes and start creating them. You move from the mercy of the crowd to the center of gravity. And everyone else, they start adjusting to you. You set the pace. You define the tone. You become the standard, not because you screamed for it, but because you built it in silence. That's what Machiavelli understood better than most. He wasn't obsessed with cruelty. He was obsessed with control, not over others, but over himself. And that's the hardest part. It's easy to lash out. It's easy to act from anger or pride or insecurity. But to hold the line, to know you could dominate, could destroy, and still choose when and how to act, that's power. That's the kind of strength that turns whispers into silence. That makes people pause before speaking your name. That turns influence into legacy. Because while others are spending their energy trying to be liked, the ruthless are shaping reality. Quietly, strategically, relentlessly, the ruthless don't react, they respond. And there's a world of difference between the two. Most people live in reaction mode. Someone disrespects them, they blow up. Someone doubts them, they over-explain. Someone criticizes them, they spiral into self-doubt. It's all emotional. It's all performative. But the ruthless, they let people talk. They let the noise pass. Because they know something most people never figure out: restraint is power. When you don't respond immediately, you gain control. You watch, you observe, you measure. And while others are burning bridges out of impulse, you're collecting information. You're expanding your leverage. You're conserving energy for the right move, the one that changes everything. That's what makes the ruthless terrifying to some and magnetic to others. They're not predictable. They don't react how you expect. They don't show all their cards, and that creates pressure, because people don't fear what they see, they fear what they can't read. And that uncertainty, it's leverage. When people don't know where you stand, they hesitate. When they hesitate, you gain time. And in a world obsessed with speed, time is the rarest currency. Use it right, and you control every outcome. That's the long game. The ruthless play it by default. They're not chasing short-term wins. They're not desperate to prove themselves today. They're building structures that last, empires that don't need babysitting, names that still echo long after they've left the room. That's legacy. And legacy isn't built on emotion. It's built on execution. Now let's be clear, being ruthless doesn't mean you never feel. It means you don't let feelings run your life. You don't hand the wheel to insecurity. You don't let pride drag you into unnecessary battles. You don't let fear of being disliked make your decisions for you. You lead with vision, not validation. You love selectively. You commit strategically. You move with intention. And you never hand someone the tools to dismantle you emotionally, mentally, or socially. That's discipline. And in a world drunk on oversharing, discipline looks like mystery. It looks like strength. It looks like something people can't place, so they respect it. Because the truth is, not everyone needs access to you. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every betrayal deserves revenge. Some things are handled in silence. Some exits are made without announcement. Some wins are claimed without applause. That's the way of the ruthless, not loud, but lasting. Not flashy, but effective. They don't move to be seen, they move to be felt. And once they're felt, they don't have to explain a thing. Because the people around them already know this is someone who won't beg, won't break, won't bend for comfort. This is someone who's already accepted the cost of power and paid it in full. And that cost, it's steep. It costs you comfort. It costs you the illusion of universal love. It costs you the easy path of blending in, of playing by rules you didn't write. But what you gain? Clarity, control, autonomy, leverage. A life where your direction is determined by you, not by the moods or opinions of the people around you. Machiavelli warned of this. He knew that those who try to please everyone are respected by no one. That a leader who fears losing approval becomes a puppet, a figurehead controlled by the very people they should be leading. The ruthless don't allow that. They know who matters and who doesn't. They burn bridges when they must without hesitation, and they protect the ones that count fiercely. They don't confuse loyalty with flattery. They don't judge people by what they say, only by what they do. And betrayal, that's not punished emotionally. It's dealt with decisively. Not to send a message, but to protect the mission. Because ambiguity is a liability. If your enemies are unsure whether you'll retaliate, they'll test you. But if the price of testing you is too high, they won't. That's how the ruthless operate. They build a name sharp enough to cut before they ever enter the room. They don't bluff. They don't threaten. They don't need to. Their history, their clarity, their consistency, that's their weapon. That's their armor. People assume ruthlessness is about destruction. But most of the time, it's the opposite. Ruthlessness creates order. It draws lines. It sets standards. It says, here's who I am. Here's how I move. Cross this line and you'll feel it. That's structure. And structure is what people crave, even the ones who say they don't. Because in a world drowning in noise and chaos, there's something deeply calming about someone who knows. Someone who acts with conviction. Someone whose presence alone changes the mood of a room. The ruthless aren't admired because they're cruel. They're respected because they bring clarity. When everyone else is guessing, they know. When others are swayed by mood, they move by principle. And when others collapse under the weight of being misunderstood, they stand taller. That's leadership. Not the kind that seeks applause. The kind that builds with or without anyone's permission. And when things fall apart, guess who people turn to? Not the agreeable one, not the soft one. The one who stayed sharp when it mattered. The one who didn't flinch. The one they once called too cold, too strict, too intense, but now call for help. That's the paradox of power. They mock it until they need it. In the end, the world always comes back to strength. Not always physical strength, not brute force, but the strength to stay steady when everything else is crumbling. The kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but shows up in how people behave when you're in the room. Do they talk differently? Do they check their words? Do they adjust their posture just a little? That's presence. And the people who carry that kind of presence didn't get it by trying to be liked. They earned it through discipline, through silence, through the relentless refusal to be ruled by softness. This is what Machiavelli meant when he said the ruthless rise. Not because they're cruel for the sake of cruelty, but because they have the stomach to do what must be done. Because they can say no when everyone else says maybe. Because they don't flinch when the cost of truth is high. That kind of clarity is rare. And in a world that's addicted to flattery, addicted to comfort, addicted to being seen as nice, someone with clarity looks like a threat. But they're not a threat. They're a necessity. When things fall apart, we don't look for the kindest person in the room, we look for the clearest. The one who doesn't blink. The one who has no need to impress you, but every intention to protect what matters. That's the essence of ruthlessness. It's not a performance, it's a position. A decision to stop negotiating with weakness. A choice to stop pretending that everyone gets to have a say in your path. The ruthless move because they're done waiting, done explaining, done pretending that the world is fair if you're just nice enough. They know better. They've seen the game. They've watched the ones who smile the most crumble under pressure. They've seen the agreeable types tossed aside when things get real. They've felt the sting of doing the right thing and still getting left behind. And that pain, that's what changed them. They didn't become cold overnight. They became tired. Tired of being stepped over. Tired of playing by the rules while others rewrote them. Tired of sacrificing clarity for comfort. And in that fatigue, they found fire. They found something stronger than niceness conviction. Conviction that says I'd rather be feared than forgotten. I'd rather be misunderstood than controlled. I'd rather lead alone than follow with the crowd. Because the crowd, for all its applause, never leads. The crowd waits. The crowd shifts. The crowd bows to those who refuse to bow at all. And those are the ones who change the game. The ruthless don't ask to be invited. They arrive. They don't wait to be chosen. They choose themselves. They don't ask what others think. They decide what they think and move accordingly. And yes, it scares people, because it's rare. It's rare to meet someone who doesn't flinch when criticized, who doesn't dilute themselves for approval, who doesn't care if their decisions make others uncomfortable. That's why people talk behind their backs. That's why they're called arrogant, cold, detached. But guess what? Those same people still adjust their tone around them. They still follow their lead when things get serious. They still lean on their strength when it all goes sideways. Because deep down, they respect what they can't manipulate. They admire what they can't predict, and they rely on what doesn't crumble. That's the quiet reality behind every ruthless person. They're not trying to impress you. They're building something you can't shake. A frame, a structure, a life that doesn't collapse when approval fades. And they've accepted something most never will, that to become truly powerful, you have to let go of your need to be liked. Because power and popularity rarely walk the same road. Popularity fades fast. Applause dies quickly. But power, real power, it endures. Because it isn't dependent on mood. It isn't dependent on whether people feel like respecting you today. It's earned, stored, and wielded by those who are unmoved by the shifting winds of perception. That's why the ruthless are remembered. Because while everyone else was trying to please, they were building. While others begged to be seen, they became impossible to ignore. While others drowned in doubt, they cut through noise like a blade. And when their legacy is written, it won't be full of compliments. It'll be full of results. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince as a love letter to tyranny. He wrote it as a roadmap for those willing to lead with their eyes open, for those ready to accept that in this world, power doesn't come from goodness alone. It comes from vision aligned with action, from strength that doesn't tremble, from presence that doesn't need to explain itself. You don't have to be cruel, but you do have to stop waiting for permission. Stop hoping that being nice will protect you. Stop believing that good intentions are enough. They're not. And if you've felt that if you've played by the rules and still lost, then this message is your call to rise. To be feared not because you harm, but because you could. To be respected not because you ask for it, but because you carry yourself like someone who doesn't need to. To be ruthless not in destruction, but in discipline. Not in cruelty, but in control. That's the difference. That's what makes the ruthless rise and stay risen. Because they stopped chasing applause and started commanding space. You made it to the end. And if you did, there's a reason. Something in you already knows that the world doesn't reward the soft hands. That applause fades. That fairness isn't guaranteed. Something in you is ready to stop playing nice just to be overlooked again. And that doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming clear. Because there's a quiet strength in not needing to explain yourself. In walking into a room and knowing you won't bend. In speaking less and meaning more. The world doesn't remember the agreeable. It remembers the unshakable. The ones who weren't afraid to walk alone if that's what it took to protect what mattered. So if this stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Let it sharpen you. Let it remind you that presence doesn't require noise. And power doesn't ask for permission. It simply is. Now is the time to stop seeking comfort in other people's approval. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to act. Because the ruthless, the truly powerful, don't wait for the world to catch up. They move, they build, they shape. And when they're gone, their name still lingers. So carry yourself like someone who doesn't need to be liked. Carry yourself like someone who's already decided. And if people fear your silence, let them. Because silence, when earned, becomes the loudest thing in the room. End of script. Have a beautiful day.